Kid Dracula is weird. I mean really weird. It's like Jeff Goldblum and Lady Gaga had a two-headed baby named Kumquat weird. Yeah. Released in Japan in October 1990 as a spin-off and a parody of Castlevania. But it never left Japan, and a few years later a Game Boy version was released to a wider audience. I can't really say why it wasn't released anywhere else given the big appeal of the Castlevania series at that point, but being near the end of the console's life might have been one reason, or an unwillingness to spend the effort localizing it. And perhaps Konami just thought it was too quirky and weird. The story finds our hero, Kid Dracula, awakening from a long sleep only to kick back on the couch and watch TV. When his own minions start attacking him, claiming allegiance to the demon Gamelove, Kid Dracula then sets out to kick everyone's butt until they respect him again. Because nothing instills employee loyalty like beating them senseless. The gameplay finds you running and jumping in a typical platform style, and shooting fireballs in multiple directions. It's more of a shooter than Castlevania for sure, and as you advance each stage you acquire permanent spells like homing clusters, bombs, the ability to transform into a bat, and eventually the ability to reverse gravity and walk on the ceiling. In between stages, you can spend the coins you gain from killing enemies with your spells on different minigames, like stabbing a barrel with a skeleton in it, or guessing the color of dancing lady's underpants. So, aside from the character Dracula, and the first stage, which plays like a sped-up trek through well-known areas in the first Castlevania, Kid Dracula really has nothing else in common with the main series. It's a very fun game, though. It's a shame it never got a wider release, because I would have definitely loved it back in the day. Konami finally gave it a Western release as part of the Castlevania Anniversary Collection earlier this year. The game seems to have been lovingly developed, with Konami's usual level of quality in that era. With nice graphics and really catchy chiptunes. It's a shame Konami has been reduced to making pachinko machines and lately re-releasing their older games instead of really developing anything new, but these re-releases are more than welcome to me. Kid Dracula has a really cartoony design, with big sprites and silly enemies. You start out fighting bats, zombies, and living armors in the first Castlevania-inspired stage, but then everything goes off the rails, and the weirdness I previously mentioned rears its double baby kumquat head. Following is a list of various enemies and bosses you fight in Kid Dracula. Samantha from Bewitched. Jet Turtles. Colonel Sanders' Nightmare. Poor guys just swimming around until you murder them for existing. Popsicle tossing Eskimos. Bomb tossing walruses. Some sort of weird humanoid duck-billed belly flopping thing. UFOs. Spider-Man, I guess? Tiny Kong. Mohawk throwing stereotypical punks. Jason Voorhees, which might be surprising that a NES game for kids has an R-rated undead movie murderer, except he had an entire game, also on the NES, so why not? Lady Liberty's TV quiz show boss battle. And at this point in the game, whatever might seem weird just seems kinda normal, so just roll with it and answer the easy questions. Birds and Bugs. That giant rolling ball from Raiders of the Lost Ark. A floating King Tut head with tiny moving hand platforms where one hit from the bubble projectiles knocks you to your death, and you get thrown back halfway through the entire stupid stage. Mega Man enemies. This flickering mess of a rejected Pokemon. More Mega Man enemies. Another rejected Pokemon. Even more Mega Man enemies. Primitive Screwhead. Finally, you fight Gamelove, one of the easiest bosses in the history of NES games. He has 2 attacks, and both are easy to avoid after the first or second time he does them. When all's said and done, Kid Dracula is a pretty good game. It has tons of personality and solid controls and game mechanics. I only really have 2 major complaints. First, the sprites are big and cartoony, but nothing is really detailed by NES standards. Certainly not when compared to Castlevania games. For some reason, the game engine has bad flicker issues during certain parts and some mild slowdown. Slowdown and flicker are commonplace in a lot of NES games, but holy crap, look at this. The other complaint is that the difficulty spikes up and down throughout the entire game. Almost of your advancement through the various stages won't even begin to challenge even the average player. But 1 second you're tearing through waves of enemies, and the next second you're at some soul-crushingly cheap one-hit knockback death pit section that makes you want to pull your hair out. Then, when you finally clear that section, the game goes back to being super easy. Even most of the bosses are as laughable to beat as they are to look at. It's really unbalanced, and those frustrating sections rank among some of the cheapest sections of any game I've ever played. It doesn't kill the experience, but it definitely makes me rank it lower. But it's a fun game aside from those issues, and it's nice to finally get a localization in the States. Castlevania fans will definitely want to check it out, but any action platforming fan should find a lot to like as well. Final score? 82. Two-headed kumquat baby.